welcome you to another installment of the ever-popular The Durham Bulls Podcast, where the Durham Bulls celebrate their entire legacy, their players, their coaches, their personalities, everything that makes Durham Bulls baseball unique and the national brand that it is. Patrick Keene is the broadcaster for the Bulls. If it's the first time joining the pod, we thank you. Please subscribe. It helps out the pod a lot. You can do that on Apple and on Spotify for the audio edition, and the video edition you can find on our YouTube channel at Durham Bulls TV. Well, we've officially run out of guests because my next guest who shows up on this week's podcast is my longtime friend and broadcast partner who I inherited. I had no input on whether I could keep this guy on the broadcast or not when I started with the Bulls in 2012. And over the last 12 years, he's been a dedicated Durham Bulls broadcaster, a dedicated Durham Bulls fan, and a dedicated personal friend of mine. And it's a great honor to bring in Scott Pose. First off, Scott, sorry to wake you up so early on a Saturday morning, but I'm thrilled to have you here. How are you?
I'm great. Glad to be here, and I appreciate it. And what you say is exactly true. I'm like a bad penny. You cannot get rid of me, and you were stuck with me from the start.
And so let's start there, right? So I know some of the stories. I'm hoping to kind of pull out some nuggets of things that maybe I don't even know after all this time because we're like an old crotchety married couple we've been in the broadcast with for so long now. But you were with the Bulls before I got here. Mm-hmm. So walk me through, how did you get the job?
Well, it was really interesting because I was at a Raleigh Hot Stove League banquet, and Neil Solantz came up to me and said, "Hey, Scott, I've seen you on CSET. Would you be interested in coming in and doing some games with me? Because I have interest in getting to the big leagues, but I need to work with a partner at some point, and I want to see if we can do that." And I said, "Sure, it sounds like a great idea." And I came in for a few games. That's when they did simulcasts on TV and radio at the same time. They weren't unified. And so Steve Barnes was here, and he and Neil would switch 3 innings. Ken Tanner would be here and do some of that too. And that's how I started. And it was just to give Neil practice with a partner. And then I got to be friends with the folks, Ken and Steve and everybody around. And we started doing games. And then Neil got the opportunity to go to Tampa, and hence that opened the door for you. And then you were stuck with me when you came in.
And still am to this day. So it's interesting because we'll go back and kind of review your baseball career, your journey from Iowa to Arkansas to the big leagues. But before we get there, I mean, so your major league career had ended. You're now living in the Triangle, living in Raleigh, and kind of dabbling, I'm guessing, in TV at that stage. Was this something you wanted to pursue, or did this opportunity kind of fall in your lap? And after a few games, you're like, this is kind of fun.
I fell into it. I mean, to get to talk baseball, I mean, that's what I do anyway. So, I mean, it was a natural marriage. And the way that I got into broadcasting was I was helping with USA Baseball. They still didn't have the complex built yet, but they worked out, and their offices were actually at the DBAP. And I was in helping. I used to be an advisor, so to speak, because they were using wood bats during the summer. And so since I had played pro ball, I would help players adjust to that in their first spring training of that. And while I was there doing that, I met John Courtwright, who I played with, who played at Duke, actually. But he was acting as a player's agent. And he said, "Hey, there's this TV station starting up called CSET. I think you'd be a good broadcaster. Have you ever thought about it?" I said, "I never have, but I might give it a try." I talked about it with Lori. She said, "Well, give it a shot." So we went over, and it was run out of the then Bobcats office because the Bobcats owner is the one who started CSET. And I went over there for an interview. And they said, "Okay, well, you can do that. We like what you can do. You've played baseball before. You sound like you can talk intelligently." And I fooled them. And so I got to do a few games when CSET started, but CSET disbanded. But because of that small sample size, that led to my opportunity with Neil and my opportunity with the Big Ten Network, who I've been with ever since too. See, they can't get rid of me either, Patrick. So it's just kind of a pattern. But I fell into the broadcasting and then have since loved it. And jury's still out whether I can do it very well or not. I don't care. I still like doing it, and it's a lot of fun. And I hope I can continue for a long time.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll figure it out in another 20 years after you've dedicated 2 more decades to the business to see if maybe you're good at it or people enjoy you. They absolutely do. And it's interesting because you come across somebody like Morgan Ensberg, who's the current manager of the Bulls, who played 7, 8, 9 years in big league baseball, doesn't need to really stay in the game, right? He's made enough money. He's done enough things. He has other interests, but he loves to teach. So he does come back to the game. But we've seen so many guys after their careers are done, they want to be dads, they want to be parents, they want to do other things, want to get into real estate, whatever that is, and divorce themselves as far as they can from the game to embark on a new chapter. That's not really the case with you. You do have a different career outside of baseball for sure, but what was the hook? What was the pull to keep you in the game when you could have really gone off on an exit ramp somewhere else?
I don't think that it ever left. I've always loved baseball. It was something that was in my blood. And when Lori and I were dating, she couldn't understand how we were at the field all day. And then when at night we came home, we'd have video games. We'd be playing baseball games on the video games. That's all we did was baseball, live, eat, sleep, and breathe it. And so we weren't always together. So when she was gone, she would call after games. What are you guys doing? I said, oh, we're just playing baseball on the NES or whatever it was. She goes, you guys are nuts. But that's the way that we were wired.
Yeah.
That's what we did. That's what we love. It's just in my blood. And I found that I missed that once baseball was over. I enjoy being a father. I spent time with my kids. I love my family. It's my most prized possession. But I got to do both. I got to spend time with my family and have a little bit of baseball. Coaching wasn't an option for me because coaching is so immersive that you are gone 9 months out of the year. And again, I don't want to make the assumption that I could have done it or done it well. I applaud anybody that stays in the game and that can do that. It just wasn't right for me. So I found the perfect blend. I had the blend of baseball because I love it. I like to talk about it. And I would do so in my sleep. It makes my wife roll her eyes many times. But nonetheless, I could spend time with my family and do both. And I feel like, you know, I've had my cake and was able to eat it too.
Yeah. So let's talk about the journey, because you brought up your love of baseball that started as a little kid, born in Davenport, Iowa, grew up in Des Moines. Your parents, your brother, I mean, do you remember the moment where the love of baseball began for you?
In Little League. My brother was 4 years older than me. And he was undersized like I was. But he chose to go into equipment managing. He was the equipment manager at the high school that I aspired to go to. And what he would do is sit in on all the practices. It didn't matter what sport it was. It was football, baseball. I wrestled for a little bit. He would listen to what those coaches said and then come home and work with me and teach me. I would not be where I am without my brother. That's for sure. And so it gave me an advantage being a little brother playing in Little League, and I had some success. Plus, I was very undersized. When I was in high school, I was on my registration for freshman football. I was 4'11", 88 pounds. And the athletic director for my school called my dad and said, "Are you sure you want him playing? He's so small." Wow. Well, I can paraphrase what my dad said, but he said, "Yes, he's going to play. Don't doubt what he can do. He's a little bit crazy, but he can run, and just let him play and you can see what it could happen." Well, I wasn't an all-star by any stretch in football, but my parents instilled me with the little engine that could mentality. This is a sport where size won't inhibit you. If you can make contact, you can run. Plus, I hit left-handed, which was just a freak of my upbringing and the way I like to swing. And I'm grateful my dad never switched me. So I threw right-handed, bat left-handed. I was always a leadoff hitter. Never hit home runs, and still like to brag about the fact that you and I have the same number of major league home runs, but I could play and I enjoyed it. And so it was an outlet for me. And I never thought that I would reach the major leagues one day. I always was trying to get to the next level. Nobody ever said, "Hey, Scott, you're a star player. You're going to be great." It was just progression along the line. I was literally going to the JV team in my high school, hoping I would make the team. Not start, just make the team. I wanted the bragging rights. And then I ended up starting on that team like, oh, wait a minute, I might have a chance. And then started to play through high school, enjoyed playing, enjoyed competing. And I went to a camp my senior year of my high school. It was called the Nebraska Professional Baseball Camp. And that's where it started to click that I might have a chance to go on to play beyond high school, because scouts evaluated us. They said, "Hey, you might have a chance." I specifically remember Mike Arbuckle, who was a scout for the Atlanta Braves, and they brought all the kids around. They talked to you. It was very similar to the way you set up your broadcast camps, Patrick, where you get to interact with all these people and they're giving you advice. And I remember Mike Arbuckle saying to me, "You've got a great swing, and I think one day you might be able to hit 270 in the major leagues." And as a high school kid, I'm thinking,
Wow.
Only 270? I thought I could be a 300 hitter. That's the crazy mentality that I have. I've been blessed or cursed with the ability to think or be dumb enough to think that I could do it. And so that became a dangerous combination. And so I thought I could go to college. I was recruited by the University of Nebraska out of high school. They had a second baseman who was named Larry Mims, who was going to get drafted. And they said, if he signs, we're going to make you an offer and you could go on to a school after high school. I thought, great. Well, he got drafted, but didn't sign. And so that was really my only option. And I wanted to go to a college Division I school, and there were no offers. So I said, okay, we'll go to a junior college for a year and see what could happen. And then I did that. We were on a trip through Oklahoma. University of Arkansas came to see another player, and then they noticed me. They needed a leadoff hitter. I hit left-handed. They liked the way that I could bunt and pull the bat back when I didn't want to bunt. And so, long story short, they had a player that got drafted in the winter. He decided to sign late. It freed up some scholarship money, and Arkansas made an offer. And then the rest is history, as they say. I got a chance at Arkansas. Just hoping to make the team, hoping to play. I ended up playing for 3 years, going to 2 College World Series and riding the backs of many good players, and then got the chance to get drafted way late in the 34th round in 1989.
So when did the growth spurt happen? So you're 4'11", 88 pounds as a high school freshman, right?
College, yeah. I graduated high school, 5'8", 145. Wow. But I could hit left-handed, I could run, and that was always, well, he's small, but back then, Division I players, that wasn't such a stretch. You could play. But when I got to Arkansas, because I could throw and run, they gave me a chance to play and move me to the outfield. And then I graduated Arkansas 5'11" and 160 pounds. And so that was the weight that you would see on the roster, like you see with players when you sign. So at 30, it said I was 5'11", 160 pounds. But that's what happened, and I don't have an explanation for it. And I'm still not, I couldn't play in the NBA or anywhere else. It's not a physical specimen by any stretch, but for our family, that was a growth spurt. Yeah. And it enabled me to play on. And then it was just get hits. If you continue to hit, you can play. And then that's what I was focused on. And that's what I got. And the other part about the love for the game, Patrick, though, and what makes me a little odd, I love the bus rides. I loved playing every day. I loved trying to play in August. I had a genuine dislike for pitchers. I still may. But I like competing against them day in and day out. I was built for the minor leagues, so I enjoyed every aspect of it. I loved every second. I loved the friends that you make. You're aware that, all the travel is the closest that you develop with some of the players. That was great. And I was getting paid to do it. Not very much in the minor leagues, but I still get paid to do it. It was a dream job. And there's not a day that goes by where a part of me doesn't miss it.
I had Tristan Peters on the podcast a couple of weeks ago and asked him what he knew about Bull Durham growing up in Canada, because it almost seems like the border kind of closed off Bull Durham's international presence, because he didn't watch it until spring training of this year when he thought he was going to be assigned to the Bulls. But he did watch it. He watched it with his wife, Erin, and said the thing that struck him was, boy, the buses back then and the stadiums you played in. It to him felt like Hollywood. Like they're over dramatizing how rough it was and how bad it was. But I told him, I said, I broke in 93. We're on those buses. Ron Shelton, who wrote the movie and directed the movie, was a minor league player. This is exactly how it was. So they're getting a completely different prism through which they see minor league baseball now, with unions and nice hotels and 2 or 3 buses and flights going to various cities. You and I did not experience that at all.
No, we didn't. It was the bus, but I still loved it because that's what we knew. But it was 142 games in 146 days. Your other days came from rainouts, but then you made up for it the next day where you're playing 2 games. But if you were a veteran on a minor league team, you got your own seat on the bus. That meant you could stretch out on 2 seats. That was it. And then the starting pitcher got his own seat. Everybody else, you were fighting amongst yourselves. Yeah. Guys were sleeping on the floor, up in the racks at the top, all of that. And then I can remember being on the bus, and you would have Gatorade bottles, and guys that would need spitters because they chewed tobacco. You could do that back then. And those bottles would just roll back and forth on the floor as you started to make turns. I know you're laughing because you heard the same thing.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I remember on the overnight bus rides, whether I was in the Midwest League or more so in the Southern League, it could be 3 a.m. You're trying to hold off going to the bathroom. The last thing you want to do is go to the back of the bus with 45 guys when everybody's sleeping and everybody says, as you mentioned, all sprawled out. And I would be basically walking on top of the armrests on both sides of the aisle because there are guys sprawled out sleeping in the aisle. And if you slipped or if the bus took a hard turn, I mean, you're in somebody's lap or you're landing on somebody, maybe tomorrow's starting pitcher.
No, that was it. That's the way you traveled back and forth on the bus. And I think they show that in Bull Durham, where you're walking back, moving out of the way to get to the bathroom. And there were bathroom rules. There were certain things that you didn't do in the bathroom. No number 2. It was only number 1. And get in and get out and get back to your seat and keep it down because guys were sleeping in the back. Yeah. So, I mean, it was just the etiquette and the intimacy because you were forced because you're just in a tight space. And we were in the era, and I sound like, when I played, we went to, uphill both ways and it snowed. But there was one bus.
Yeah.
Just one for 30 guys. I mean, that's the team and staff. Coaches sat up front. Trainer was there. Everybody else piles in behind. That was it. And you were going in the Sally League at that time. I can remember Charleston, West Virginia, the furthest north, Savannah, Georgia, the furthest south. There were 10-hour bus rides in that league. Yeah. And so you got up, strapped it on and played with your per diem. Maybe you could go to McDonald's for a Happy Meal or hit the Wendy's buffet and then go play some more. It was a great life. It was a lot of fun. I'm sure people are horrified by it now, but I wouldn't have traded it for anything.
Yeah. I mean, you're right about the stories because I will not name players, but I mean, numerous times the bus had to pull over because somebody's throwing up in the back of the bus. They had too much to drink the night before. They're walking in with the dark shades, but they're one of their star players and they can't leave them behind, or guys are late for the bus. And, you're lucky if the air conditioning works. I mean, it's hot as Hades on these buses. As you mentioned, everybody's on one bus. It's like a glorified school bus.
Yeah.
And there was no luxury item on that bus. You're lucky if it had either a Betamax recorder or a VHS playback machine up top. And if you did, half the time it didn't work.
Right. That's right. And you had your Walkman. You had the Walkman and you had the tapes. And so you had your case of tapes, and that's kind of was your escape. And I didn't even get into border crossings when you go, because we would play in Canada and in the Pioneer League at a border crossing. You learned etiquette really quickly because you have international players on. All the visas have to go up, and you just sit there and you're stone silent because you don't imagine a major league team and the amount of sarcasm that goes on and the ribbing. But that was strongly discouraged at the border because there was always one guy that would like to. You did not do that to border agents because the bus, they would just hold you up for 5 hours and nobody wanted that. So it was like, hey, guys, just be cool to this guy. Yeah. Let's get through this and let them do their jobs. And this was pre, 9/11 security, all the concerns. This was still going on then. And you learn very quickly that you treat those border folks with respect so you can get on through and get to the game. So you might have a chance to get a nap before you took BP. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. So many, I mean, we could do an entire podcast on just minor league travel back in the 90s and 2000s. But when you mentioned the Walkmans, and you may know this guy now that I bring it up, Nick Ungs, who is the pitching coach for the University of Iowa. So he was on a team with me as a pitcher because he pitched in Northern Iowa. He was on a team with me with the Mudcats, and he sat in the seat behind me. What we did, we didn't share a Walkman. We shared headphones of XM satellite radio. When you had the portable unit with the suction cups, and you had to have the antenna to try and get the signal all right. We would suction cup this thing to the window. He was in the seat behind me, and we would have a two-piece earphones. He would take one. I would take one. We would agree on the channel, whether it was, the 80s or the 90s or the Major League Baseball game that you could pick up. And that's how we would travel. And it'd be 2 a.m. and we'd be listening to David Lee Roth, on Sirius 80s channel or something else. But that was our thing. I mean, he was in that seat the entire season he was there.
That was cutting edge technology at the time too. You guys were really on the envelope, because the premium was on batteries. Batteries became currency, and you could earn some money if you had some extra batteries because you'd be in the middle of, because buses didn't stop. You didn't stop anywhere. Once you started, you were going until you got to your home city. So in the middle of a 10-hour bus ride, you ran out of batteries. You could charge your premium to somebody if they needed them, and they would pay it.
And they knew me being the radio guy, I tended to have extra batteries for a lot of different things. AA, AAA, XM satellite radio batteries, which were like not lithium, but they were different. I had it all.
Yep. That was it. That was and you would do that. Yeah. And then when you got out of AA and you got to AAA, then you learned to fly commercial. And if you started to do that at the start, you don't know any different. You're flying. I'm not on a bus. It's great. It's harder to sleep on a plane, and you have to make connections. But this starts I think the beginning of bitterness for people that get to the big leagues that come back, because in the big leagues you fly charter flights. You're put onto the tarmac. You walk up into the plane. You fly where you're going to go. You have your own first class seat. You sleep. You get back. But then when you get sent back to AAA, you're back to flying commercial again, and that's a wake up call. It's like, oh, I've tasted what it's like to be in the big league, and now I'm back in it. No, but it was all great. And it's just all one of the contrasts of, you're trying to get there and everybody's talking about it and what's it like. And you brought up Tristan Peters seeing Bull Durham for the first time. That was our litmus test as college guys. We had friends that we had played with that were in the minors, and we immediately checked with them. Is that what it's like? I saw it on Bull Durham. Was it actual? Because I've never been there. I don't know. And they were saying, for the most part, it is. They said some of it was sensationalized. I mean, girls aren't waiting for us. There's not the groupies that but they said, you're riding buses like that. You're playing. Your manager's going to get mad if you lose 7 in a row. He's going to throw bats at you in the shower. That does happen. But the flavor of life, I still do not think that there is a movie that captures the essence of minor league baseball as good as Bull Durham did.
I mean, so many different tangents I could say. First off, we were talking about stories. Thanks for sharing that about Bull Durham and what the Arkansas players thought, hoping to experience a lifestyle like that. One last story. So my first year with the Bulls was 2012. Hideki Matsui was on the Bulls for a short period of time that year. I was in awe of everything. I was not really prepared for AAA and all the different elements that came with it. But what I do remember is when Matsui was making a trip with us, flying to Indianapolis to take on the Indians. We flew Southwest. And here's a World Series MVP, right? One of the absolute legends of Japanese Major League Baseball. Waiting in queue at the Southwest terminal to get on the flight with an unassigned seat. We boarded as a group almost last. So there are basically a couple of like window seats way in the back, and everything else is a middle seat. And I'm walking right behind Matsui. We're looking for the first open seats. And again, he's charter flights, New York Yankees, MVP. He had to sit in a middle seat, flanked by a couple of older women, probably in their 70s or 80s. And Hideki, as everyone knows, he's a mountain of a man.
Yep.
And so if you can envision him kind of shoehorned into a middle seat with his knees higher than they should be, flying, I forget where I think we were going to Indianapolis or maybe Indy to Norfolk, and didn't complain, didn't say a word. He just sat down. The women had no idea who he was and how popular he was, and how much money he made, and the fame and everything. He was just a gentleman boarding a Southwest flight very late, sitting in a middle seat that they probably wish was vacant.
Yeah, and that's a flavor of life in AAA at the time, and what happens on the commercial flights. And if you play it, I played in Edmonton. You're getting up at 3 a.m. because you have to clear customs. Yeah. You're going, and there's a connection that you're going to have to make in the States, because if you're going from Edmonton to Phoenix, good luck. So that's a long day of travel. And then, oh, by the way, you're playing that night. You better get a couple hits, because if you don't, you might get released. So, you just find a way. That's just kind of the way that the minor leagues are. Well, you jogged a memory of mine from that year. I'll never forget when Daisuke Matsusaka faced Hideki Matsui, and the crush of media that fell on the DBAP, where it was like a major league game because there were so many media there. That was a lot of fun. We had a ball with that. But that's the other piece I would like to bring out in this, is that baseball has afforded me so many experiences, either as a player, as a broadcaster, that I have gotten to meet some of the most interesting and best people, and I'm forever grateful. And I thank I thank my lucky stars every day that I get that chance, because I've had a lot of time to analyze my time in this game. And what brings me back are the friendships and the people that I have been able to make, and the people that I've been able to meet. That's what keeps you going. And there's a great group in Durham, and it's afforded me the greatest opportunity. And I consider myself very lucky to be able to come back there and do that every day. And you are one of them, Patrick. You are one of those people that I've had the chance to meet over the years. You've been stuck with me. You're a captive audience. I know you can't get away, but it's been part of the joys of coming to the DBAP every day.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you're part of my family. You're part of the Bulls family. But for me personally, and for Catherine and for Cade, you are an extension of our family. So I'm really, really grateful to have inherited somebody with the personality you have, the experience you have, the runway that you have, and just the spirit and soul. So I'm grateful to you. So before we start tearing up and crying here, and needing therapy sessions, when did you realize you were fast?
That would always been my calling card. It was Little League. I was a step closer hitting in the first the batter's box, and so my speed, and I could outrun a lot of folks. So the big kids would try to come after me, and I could outrun them. But it was always on the playground. Flag football, I noticed, and speed was always the calling card, and that was just kind of the thing that capped. And then we would go to Bill Clark. I'll never forget him. He's the Red Scout, and at Hoover High School, he would have a free agent tryout camp. And the first thing that they would do at that camp is run you in a 60-yard dash. And he would tell you, if you can't run under a 7 flat 60, we're going to send you home. And they're like, wait a minute, you haven't even seen me hit or throw. Because we don't care if you can't run fast enough. And so that became a quest. At 14, I couldn't do it. At 15, I couldn't do it. But then it started getting me focused. I got into track and tried to refine the speed, but it came along, and I was lucky and blessed. It's a God-given gift, and I could run. And so I use that to my advantage. And that's one of the things that helped get me drafted and helped keep me around. At
your peak, what was your home to first base time? Because it was extraordinary. It was near the top of the table in Big League Baseball when you were there.
But these were hand time. But I mean, I was hand time 3.65 at points. My very first major league at bat is timed around 3.84 to first, which is higher than major league average. So it might be a function, and they had to break it down to feet per second now because they're taking away my step advantage being left-handed. But at the same time, it was just something that I did. And I didn't figure out stealing bases until later in my career, maybe too late. But once I did that, then I had a chance and was able to stick, which I'm still amazed at.
Yeah. Who taught you how to steal bases?
Jose Cardenal.
Okay. Wow.
He was talking about that. And then you pick up little nuances. I mean, I was always glued to see what pitchers were doing when I was on the bench, watching the game and learn and pick up. And then I had a roommate in Columbus. His name is Tim Barker. He has since passed away. God rest his soul. An incredible player who never got a chance in the major leagues, but got to AAA. He explained to me one of the finer points, and that is to get on the insides of your feet so you can go either way, which is kind of a technique from soccer, because he played that competitively almost all the way through high school. And that helped me tremendously. And then that's what gave me that extra step where I could slide in, where I did need a foam finger, to slide in and be safe. So
we had Jake Mangum and his dad, John, on the podcast a couple of months ago, and the College World Series came up, and Jake was fortunate enough to play there at Mississippi State, representing the SEC. And the phrase he used to describe what the Omaha experience was, he called it the Disney World of baseball, where it was just a festival and tens and tens of thousands of people who dropped all of their plans because they can't plan that their team is going to be in Omaha. They win the Super Regional the week before. They're playing 5 days later in Omaha. But droves of fans represented all these schools, and maybe some who aren't even represented, are there for this. It's almost like a carnival, like Rio atmosphere. Can you, and you went there twice back in the 87 and 89. What was it like then versus what it is like now? And have you experienced anything like that in your career from your time there?
No, I think it is the pinnacle of the collegiate experience. You grew up, if you're a kid of the 80s and you had ESPN, that was their programming. They had the College World Series. Maine was in it, Miami, Texas, Hawaii. I mean, I could name all those teams, and those guys became almost idols. And I was hoping maybe one day I could get there. We came over and played in an Omaha tournament during the College World Series in 1985, my senior year. We saw Texas play Arizona. Greg Swindell pitching against Joe McGrain, two future major leaguers, and Billy Bates, who was a left-handed hitter, decided to flip around and hit right-handed just for an at-bat, hits a double off McGrain and gives Texas the win. Absolutely amazing game. And I can remember sitting at the stadium. I'm down the left field line. God, one day I hope I'm good enough to be able to play here. 2 years later, we were there. I don't know how it happened, but it did. But here's what happens in Omaha, even before all the things that they have now, because they built a beautiful stadium. The hotels are around there. They have the area where people can celebrate and congregate like at a football tailgate. But even before then, when it was at Rosenblatt, which was the old AAA stadium for the Omaha Royals, the Omaha fans would choose a team and then cheer for them. So no matter who you played for, even if you were a team that rarely got there, 14,000 people were at your game, and over half of them were cheering for your team. It is a humbling and eye-opening experience. And I'm not joking, because I played there and because I was able to perform in front of 14,000 people, that was always my benchmark to go back and say, well, I can play in front of crowds, so why couldn't I get to the big leagues? That's not going to be intimidating. You start to learn to play with the different levels at the stadium, because, and that's something that I don't think fans can appreciate. When you're in A-ball, there's no upper deck, so you get used to playing in those stadiums. You start to get to Double-A, you see 2 decks, and then the major leagues, you get 3. And as a fielder, that's disconcerting because it changes your background, because you've got to pick up the ball out of white shirts, out of bigger banks of lights that are much brighter, all of those things. It kind of, it's those are the little things that separate the levels from where they are, but you gain confidence by having some success in those environments, and you can adapt. And that was the fun part for me. I was like a kid at fantasy camp, seeing if I could do all of those things, but Omaha was the start. I hope that makes sense. It gave you a glimpse into my simple little mind and where that went.
Well, let's talk about the day you were drafted, because that era has changed. I mean, I remember back in the Southern League, probably the early 2000s, when back to SiriusXM broadcast the draft. That was a kind of a landmark day, because otherwise it was just kind of in a back room. You'd find out who got drafted by reading Baseball America a couple of weeks later, and they list all the rounds. They didn't want people to know when they were drafted because they thought they might talk and it might jam up the signing bonus asks by some of the players. But I remember specifically the first year that they carried it, Tommy Lasorda, I heard on the same SiriusXM that Nick and I were listening to, Tommy Lasorda was on speakerphone, and he was announcing who the first round pick of the Dodgers was in that draft. Now the draft is national television. Now they're beginning to bring fans in, just like what the NBA and the NFL and NHL do, where baseball has always been kind of last at the party here. But when you got drafted back in 1989, it was still kind of that mode of secrecy where nobody really knew what was going on. Did you find out days later? How did you find out?
No. We were in Omaha, and I was in the version of the CIA draft that you bring up, because you knew the first round pick. That was the first one of one was national news, and that went out. Beyond that, good luck. And so the draft would go on for 3 days. So you had the top prospects would go day one. I had no delusions that I would be drafted in that day. But then you start to wonder second and third day. All of those days were my senior year when we were in Omaha. And so first day goes by. We're playing, the drafts go. We don't hear anybody off our team. And then the way it came was we're going to practice on the second day. Everybody's getting on the bus. Did you hear anything? Yeah, I did. I heard from the Indians. Yeah, I did. I heard from so-and-so. And it's like, okay, it's happening. Am I going to get called? Well, the Red Scout, who I knew, was in Omaha. And so this is before cell phones. You had to call into a messaging service. And if you're scouting, you don't have access to a phone. So he could be scouting a game for 3 hours and not know what happened. Second day goes by. My friends are getting drafted. My roommate gets drafted by the Rangers. Pumped for him. That's great. In the back of your mind, you're saying, well, man, did I do enough? Am I going to get drafted? Well, third day was an eventful day because it was the day we were eliminated. Wichita State beat us again
Right.
Sent us home. I'm not bitter, really. And they won the national championship that year. But I'm done. I've played my last college game. My friends are all drafted. I'm coming back to the hotel, and the phone has the blinking red light.
Oh gosh.
So that means you have a message. Like, sweet. All right, well, let's see what this is. It could have been mom and dad forgot something because they drove over to Omaha. You know, it could have been girlfriend. I didn't know. I call, and it said, you need to call Tom McDevitt, who is the Red Scout. I get down to the payphone. I make the call.
What are you feeling right now? Are you nervous? Are you anxious? Are you about to throw up?
Well, a little bit of both. I'm thinking, well, maybe he's calling because I didn't get drafted, and maybe he's asking me to be a free agent, go to a camp. But I knew it might be an opportunity, so I had a lump in my throat. And so I call him, and we called him Skip because he was the head coach at Eastern Illinois. I said, hey, I got a message from you. And he goes, Scotty. And his exact words were, how would you like to be a Cincinnati Red? And I said, what? Are you serious? He goes, congratulations. We drafted you in the 34th round. I'll be to your house in a couple of days. You go down and get your stuff, and I'll give you the details. And that was it. I was thrilled. I didn't care when it was. I got drafted. I've got a chance. It's something that I worked for my entire life. Didn't happen when I was in high school. Didn't happen in college until my senior year. But I got a chance, and that's all I needed, and the rest is history. And I'm forever grateful because it changed the trajectory of my baseball career and life. And I was thrilled. So the next day, we're getting on the bus to go back. My coach, Norm DeBryan, Hall of Fame coach, looks at me before I get on the bus. He goes, have you heard anything? And I said, yeah, I got drafted by the Reds. He goes, congratulations, you worked hard. And that was it. And that's what we talked about on the way back to school after we got beat was, hey, you get a chance. Where's their team? What you're going to go to? And we were kind of all set in our ways and going to start that journey that we saw in Bull Durham.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a couple of first. I don't want to dominate your time here, but these are awesome stories. And a lot of these stories I didn't know all the details about. So take me now to first day as a pro, like your first instructional camp or mini camp, or what was next a couple of weeks later after you signed the contract with the Reds?
You're going to appreciate this. I go to Billings, Montana, which is at altitude, and I'm getting all the advice from people that signed me saying, look, you're going to be playing with wood now. He goes, Scotty, the kind of hitter that you are, a line drive, aluminum's going to be a line drive with wood. Just keep doing what you're doing. Best advice I ever got. I didn't have to worry about adjusting to wood. Just get the barrel on the ball, hit on the ground, run like crazy. But guess who was running that camp? Jimmy Hoff.
Was he really?
Jimmy Hoff was the camp coordinator for our mini spring training with the Reds. So a lot of the guys that came together on that team in Billings, Montana were college draft guys and guys I played against either in summer ball or that season. Like Tim Pugh played at Oklahoma State. We faced him a couple of times because we would have series against him at Arkansas. So I'm getting to be friends with him. And Trevor Hoffman was on that team. He was a shortstop who played third base at Arizona, who we played against in college. So we all glommed together and we're trying to figure this out. We're hitting with wood. I'll never forget playing catch with an actual National League baseball. I stared at that thing for 5 minutes before I threw. I was like, this is a real big league baseball. I'm using it. We're playing with it. I have a mark on my bat from a National League baseball. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that got me excited. Is that we're not in Kansas anymore. We're playing, and this is this first step. And so then it was just try to figure out to hit. And then what's it like? It was basically a curiosity. Can I actually get a hit with a wood bat in a baseball game, and what's it going to sound like? And then it happened. Hey, this is pretty cool. And then can I hit this guy? Couple hits. Hey, maybe I can stay. And it just kind of progressed from there. And you see it, but you see the talent. And that was the thing that amazed me is in the leagues that we were playing in Billings, when Jimmy Hoff was running the camp for the Reds, guys that could just walk in off the street in jeans and throw 95. Now they didn't know where it was going, but it was just talent. And it was like, I've got to compete against that. And so then you started to shore up and figure out a way. And then that's when the competitive juices kick in, the little desire to fight and all that. Oh yeah, I can do this too. And then that just makes everybody better. And that's what I remember most. But I remember learning the major league way, but here's the advantage that I had. Everything that Jimmy and the staff, Jose Cardenal was there too, was teaching at that camp. I had learned at my good college program because we had played such a high level for so long. So I had an advantage. I knew what base to throw to. I knew about the cutoff man. Now, keep in mind, we're being trained with high school kids that might not have known that. So there's perfectly good reason to do that. It gives you the foundation. But at the same time, I had a little bit of an edge because I learned all I needed to learn for the most part at Arkansas. And then that carried me and gave me a little bit of a jump.
Yeah. And you grinded then for about 3.5 years through your rookie season, short season, through 90, 91, and 92. And the next question is, as far as like your first big league call up is very, very, very different from most anybody else's. So as you're going through those 3.5 years, how are you feeling you're stacking up? Do you feel like this is a career path to the big leagues? Did you feel you had an opportunity with the Reds? And what did you know about a looming expansion draft with the Florida Marlins and the Colorado Rockies before the 1993 season, and how, if in any way, you might be involved in that?
All right. That's an excellent question. It's something I thought a lot about. Is that I didn't make up my mind to necessarily get to the major leagues. My mind was made up to play as long as I possibly could at a high level. I mean, as long as I could be productive. So your question was, could I make a living at this? I was always on the quest to find the pitcher that I couldn't hit. I never found him. Now, that doesn't mean that I never hit well, that I didn't hit poorly at times. I did, but I didn't feel like I was overmatched. Okay. And that was the clue to me. We had always heard talks that expansion was coming, but we didn't know what that meant.
Right.
We just thought, okay, it's going to be opportunities, and nobody knew what expansion looked like because it hadn't happened since 77. And so at 93, 2 teams were coming. Everybody was hopeful. We knew there'd be movement, but we didn't know what that was. So I get sent to the fall league, and that's when the first expansion draft took place. So a lot of the guys that I'm playing with are getting drafted. I'm like, oh, dang. And then it was a interesting rule because you had a 40-man protection year, but that year teams could only protect 15. And then if a player got taken, then they could protect 3 more, and vice versa. So there was a lot of exposed people. So it was really interesting to see who got taken and who didn't. Yeah. But the expansion draft came and went. I didn't get taken, and I wasn't on the 40-man for the Reds. So I was like, okay, that was great, but I had a good year in AA. Maybe, let's see what happens at AAA, and maybe I can make some moves. Well, the Rule 5 draft happened right as the fall league was in. And I go in to thank my manager, who was Roy Matika, and say, hey, thanks for a great year. He goes, hey, Scotty, you might get drafted in this Rule 5 draft. He said, I know the Rangers were here looking at you, and they may take you. I'm like, really? He goes, no, I'm being dead serious. They've been looking at you for the past 2 weeks, and you might get taken by the Rangers. I'm thinking, now that got me excited because nobody has ever said anything like that for me before. Wow. And so I'm driving home the day of the Rule 5 draft. And again, no cell phones or anything.
Which is another really kind of covert piece of baseball transaction at that during that time.
Yeah. It was Rule 5. Well, at that year, they did not have to offer a player back if they didn't make the major league roster. So they gave the expansion teams a break to expand their rosters. So I'm playing a game with myself. I'm driving from Phoenix, Arizona to Des Moines, Iowa. A landmark is Tucumcari, New Mexico, which is on the border of Kansas and New Mexico. And you can start to angle towards Iowa. And I made up my mind, I'm going to stop and call there. Well, I get to a payphone. I call my mom and dad. And my dad says, wait a minute, we got to let your mom get on the phone. I'm like, oh, something happened. And I'm expecting them to tell me, you got drafted by the Rangers. He said, my dad said, well, you're a fish. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah, you got drafted by the Marlins, and they put you on the 40-man roster. Then everything else went no. I was like, are you serious? Yeah, I made it. And whatever else he said, they're going to call you and let you know. And you're on the 40-man roster. You got drafted by the Marlins. And I'm like, that was the shortest drive from Tucumcari to Des Moines that I've ever had. I was on cloud 9. I don't remember anything other than my mind racing. I'm going to get a chance. Finally, I'm on a big league roster. I'm going to get a chance in spring training. So I get home after that week. Renee Lashman calls me and he says, "Hey, we've got another guy penciled in center field, but you're on the 40-man roster. You're going to get a chance. We'll see you in spring training." And then all the stuff comes. I had to go get a headshot. I was assigned a number, which was 2. That was a big deal because if you're assigned a number that is not lower than 30 or higher than 30, they're taking you seriously. You know, now numbers have changed. Normally you got a football number when you were a guy like me, but no, they gave me an actual number, and I'm going to spring training, and then the rest is history. I got ready for spring training, went down there to see what could happen, and then kind of was a fly in the ointment, so to speak. But it was a great experience, and I was thrilled and just glad to be there.
I'm curious about the phone call that your dad received. Who called him? What did it? Because I'm sure when you finally got back, you're like, "Dad, tell me every single word that they said, start to finish. What happened?"
Actually, I didn't. I didn't care that it happened. I didn't care who talked to my dad. It just happened, and it was official, and they wouldn't lie to me about something like that. So I was just grateful that I had the chance. I think it was an official from the Marlins. It might have been Dave Dombrowski, who was the GM at the time. But they're just saying, "Hey, Scott's been drafted by the Marlins. He wrote down the particulars. We'll be in touch on this and this date. Yes, he's on the 40-man. Spring training starts. He'll come down in February, and our spring training is going to be here." And it was that.
How long was your dad sitting on this news? I mean, I'm sure he was waiting for you to call, right? But he didn't know when you would.
That's right. That's it. So they're sitting at home, and I knew he never got mom on at the same time. It was usually when I called home with the updates. You know, I call him twice a week. I still to this day. He would hear it and he said, "Okay, I'll go get your mother. You can tell her." Well, I knew it was special news if they both had to be on the phone at the same time. So that's just kind of the way it worked out. And then the rest is history, as they say.
So what, tell me then 2 things about spring training. And I've heard most of these stories, but I'm curious, I would like our audience to listen to them, about when you learn you made the major league roster, the opening day roster in '93 for the Marlins. And then what was it like on opening day? You're the leadoff hitter. You're running into center field. It's Joe Robbie Stadium. It's the first game in franchise history. It's packed with 50,000 people. Charlie Hoff is on the mound. Benito Santiago is your catcher. I mean, from that 4'11", 88-pound high school freshman to now, to that moment, what on earth did you feel?
Well, I didn't find out I had made the team until the day before the game, because it was very much like my career was going. Get to the next level, get to the next day. We'll see what happens. And in spring training, it's kind of like what happens in Major League. You'll play a game, and then some people will be sent down, and the numbers dwindle. That call never happened. And so we were playing a split squad game in Jacksonville. I had a game, I can't remember where it was. We went up to Jacksonville. And after that series, the plane was leaving from Jacksonville to fly to Miami for opening day and get ready. I play the games. We're playing against the Royals. Mark Gubazov pitched. I remember, got a hit or two. He threw a slider down there. We won't get into counts and stuff, but I remember all that stuff. And then I'm waiting for somebody to tell me something after the game. Nobody said anything. Okay, I brought my clothes. So this is no lie. We get on the charter flight. We're in Jacksonville. I'm sitting next to Trevor Hoffman, who's made the team as a pitcher. We came together in Billings in that spring training. And he looked at me, and they served us a steak and lobster dinner on the way down. And we hadn't heard anything. And he looks at me, and I look at him, and he says, "We may have made it." And so I was like, great. I think we might have made the team because they're doing this, and we're going down to Miami. Well, so we fly down there. We land in Fort Lauderdale. We go to our hotel, and then we have a workout at the field the next day. And so at the workout, I figured I made the team, and I'm a 4th or 5th outfielder. I'm just glad to be there. Honestly, I just made the team. So we're getting ready. Before we go out to the field, Latch calls me and Chuck Carr, who is the projected center fielder, into his office. And he said, "I need to talk to you both." I'm like, okay. And I fully expected him to say, "Chuck's the starting center fielder. Scott, you did a good job. Just wait your chance. And you'll get a chance to play." And I was ready to accept that. We get in that office, we're both there. First thing he says is, "Scott Poe is going to be the starting center fielder for the Florida Marlins tomorrow." and a lump in my throat.
but
Immediately went in. I was shocked. I could not believe it. I'm getting emotional thinking about it. And Chuck was visibly upset, understandably so. I go out to practice and take BP, and I'm thinking, what have I done? What have I gotten myself into? Because during that day, we're having defensive meetings. And in the defensive meeting, they're saying, all right, Scott, you're playing center field. When Strawberry is up, you have to play here. When Eric Davis comes up, you have to shade over here. And I'm logging this because my brother and I did this in our backyard. And I'm thinking about, what did I do? And I can't wait to tell him this because now they're telling me actually how to play them. So we go to the offensive meeting. Oral Hershiser is going to pitch you this way. This is the guy that won in '88 the MVP of everything. And now he's trying to get me out. And I'm like, I can't wait to tell my brother this. You know, they're telling me, and we're going to the meetings, and I'm like, yes, but I'm like a little kid in fantasy camp thinking, okay, what have I done? And so we get to the game, and I had a routine. I hit on the tee, and it was a surreal experience because I'm in the cages the day of the game after the workout. And I forgot the most important part. My mom and dad came down just to see the opening day. The day that I found out, my mom and dad were at the hotel at the Marriott, and I told them I was a starting center fielder. My dad started to cry. So did my mom. They were really excited. And that was probably the best experience of the whole thing, was being able to tell them and thank them for what they did for me. So now fast forward, we get to the game. I think I'm not going to be able to sleep that night. Slept like a champ. Get there in the cage. Chris Berman's coming down the tunnel. He stops me and says, Scott, great spring. Congratulations. You were the underdog that could. You made the team, and we're looking forward to calling your game. He goes, and remember, his big thing was nicknames.
Yeah.
He goes, what nicknames do you like, or what? And I said, Chris, my favorite names that you've ever come up with were Jim People Are Strange Morrison or Von Purple Haze. He goes, oh, you like your music. He goes, all right, I'm going to work on that. He goes, I'm going to tell you one thing I'm not going to do. Strike and pose is too easy. It's a gimme. I'm not doing it. I'll come up with a name for you. It might not be today, but I'll come up with it. I said, hey, that's great. And he said, get back to work and we'll go. So Bernie Kosar's coming down. I mean, there's all kinds of people. It's just random people that I knew as a kid. So I'm nervous. We get out in the field. There's a flyover. Place is packed. I've got goosebumps. And I'm nervous as can be. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. Well, the game starts. I'm out in the outfield. Charlie Huff strikes out this side. I still have a lump, but because he struck everybody out, I didn't have to worry about running down a ball. Get in, and I'm the leadoff hitter, so I got to hurry up and get my batting gloves on, get the bat, and Oral Hershiser is on the mound. And so I'm going up for my first major league bat. Everybody's 45,000 people are starting to work to a crescendo to cheer as the first pitch is thrown. But Oral Hershiser was picking his warm-ups, and he did his thing, and then he got the ball, and we're getting ready to start, and I'm in the box, and he's on the mound like this. He's staring straight down. And I'm like, what's he doing? Now, it didn't take much for me to get riled up about pitchers, and it was starting because it's much easier to compete against a guy that you want to get a hit off of rather than worrying about the context of the situation. And so he did a stare, and about after a prolonged pause, he stares up and he looks in for the sign. It reminded me of my brother in the backyard. And then all things kicked in. He wasn't Oral Hershiser anymore. He was just the pitcher. And I wanted to beat him because I wanted the bragging rights for when we went to bed that night, because he would talk trash to me if he got the best of me. And I want to make sure that didn't happen. The instincts kicked in. I was playing the game that I had for 1,000 times before. And then I had surreal moments where I would kind of take a mental log of a play, say, I can't wait to tell my brother about that. Or I can't wait to tell my friends about that. But you would have those moments where I'd be playing, concentrating the game, and then I hear this buzz. It's a blimp above the stadium. Never had that before. It was just things like that. You would have surreal moments of in and out, but during the game, you concentrate on it because you didn't want anything to happen badly because of you. They were on your watch. And so we play the game, end up winning. And it was probably the neatest experience that I had in baseball, to that point.
I mean, I hate that we're almost out of time because there are so many other topics I'd like to cover. But what strikes me too, and for the fans who may not know, is that as Scott is sitting on this charter plane going down from Jacksonville to Miami, Trevor Hoffman is sitting next to him. Trevor Hoffman who was wondering if he made the team like you did, like, hey, elbowing each other. I think we made it. Do we make it? He wanted to be a Hall of Famer.
Right.
And you were his guest at the Hall of Fame ceremony in Cooperstown a couple of years ago with your history and coming up through the Reds organization with the Marlins and just your great friendship, the 20 years since.
Oh, I showed up there because it meant so much. I mean, that's the way this works in the minor leagues. Nobody said to Trevor, you're going to be a Hall of Famer when he's a shortstop, for the Billings Mustangs. You play with these guys, you become friends, and you grind it out together, and then the play over time dictates that. He had a God-given gift. He could throw 95 in his sleep. I remember the day they made him a pitcher, but those friendships never go away. I'll tell you a funny story about Trevor is I was there the day they made him a pitcher. There's an adversarial relationship between position players and pitchers because they're just on different programs. And so you compete against each other a lot. So position players hang together in pitchers. And when they were going to make him one, we were teasing him, but I can't believe you're going to cross that line. I mean, pitchers work once every 5 days. They complain about everything. They got 8 guys running down their mistakes. You're going to be one of them. And I don't want to do it. This is ridiculous, but it's a chance I can still continue to play. Because they told him if you were just going to play, we'd have to release you. But because you can throw, let's see what you can do. Well, we're down the right field line in A-ball in Charleston at Watt Powell Park, and the bullpen's down there, and we're stretching to get ready for BP, and he starts to throw. And they had the designated day. He picks the leg up, and he throws it to Jimmy Lett, who's catching without a mask. You could hear the ball. Like you could hear Manny Rodriguez. You could hear the ball. The seams are popping. And Jimmy Lett looks at it and picks up the mask and puts it on. It scared him so bad. No joke. And he had no pitching mechanics whatsoever, and he's just letting it go. The rest is history. So long story short, I made Double-A the next year. Trevor had to be sent to A-ball, okay, because he was a pitcher. By the end of that year, he was already back up with us in Double-A as a pitcher. So you knew that there was something special. His first Major League debut was 2 nights after opening day. He has to come in with the bases loaded and face Eric Davis. Good luck, kid. Guess what he did? He struck him out. And so then it became, you made it. You got your chance, and here you go. And he got to pitch a little more, and then he was in that trade. Sheffield comes over. He goes to San Diego. Rest of history. He's a Hall of Famer. But we went from guys grinding it out in the minor leagues. He was going to be a PE teacher if it didn't work out for him. Next thing you know, he's a Hall of Famer. He meets Tracy. I remember when he met his wife, he called me in Chattanooga. He said he met the most beautiful girl in the world. He's out over his skis. I can't believe it. I'm going to marry her. He ends up marrying her. They come to our wedding. Lori knows Tracy. I mean, it's just, you become friends over time, and that's the way it was. And like you, he was stuck with me, and we're friends, and we have been for years. But those are the friendships you make, and that's what makes baseball the best thing because of the people you meet and the grind along the way.
Yeah. Just a couple more rapid fire questions because I just want our fans, our audience to get at least a little snippet here of your other hobbies, your other interests and other things. But there's one more first that I've never asked you about. And as I was doing I actually did a little bit of research before this interview today, despite us being friends for 12 or 13 years. Your only postseason appearance was in the 9th inning of Game 5 against the Cleveland Indians with the New York Yankees. Came out as a pinch runner. A guy who's just grinding through year after year after year out of big league baseball for several years. Then you get the opportunity with the Yankees, and you're now in Game 5, down a run in the 9th inning against Cleveland with Jose Mesa on the mound. Well, again, as that 4'11", 88-pound kid, now you're in a Game 5 in the playoffs wearing a Yankees uniform. Well, what do you remember about that moment?
I remember that series as being one of the most stressful because you had vested interest in winning and continuing and carrying on the tradition. And 24 other guys are depending on you to do your job. I make no bones about where my spot on the roster was. I was the pinch runner. I was the guy that was going to be the defensive replacement or pinch run if needed. Joe Torre did not want the game to come down to me at the plate with the winning run. But invariably that happens in the playoffs because that's what the opposing team's trying to do. But the situation came up. We're down a run. O'Neill hits a double with 2 outs. He's at second. He didn't want to come out of the game, and it came out in Joe Torre's book. Why are you taking me out? He goes, because the other guy's faster than you, and we need that. But he called me the other guy. They didn't call me by name. It's just the other guy. So I go out there and I'm running the bases, and Bernie Williams is up next. And Bernie was amazing. And I think we got a chance. If he goes deep, we're going to take the lead, but he's going to drive me in with 2 outs. But you're thinking what you are as a pinch runner. Don't get picked off. Don't screw up. Well, it was only 1 pitch. Mason throws the pitch. Bernie hits it well, hits it high into center field deep, but it's a catchable ball. And Marquise Grissom catches that as my foot hits home plate. And the fans go nuts. It ends the game. That was the end of my postseason experience. That's the one chance that I had. And we were the wild card team, begrudgingly. Everybody thought that was a bad thing. We didn't even celebrate the wild card championship, but we were in the playoffs. The plane was gassed up to go to Baltimore. Yeah. We were going to head there, but Cleveland won the game. They go to Baltimore, and they went out of the World Series, and that was the end of the postseason. Yeah. And that was that.
And Cleveland got beat by the Marlins, ironically.
And it was, and that is the time that I got to meet George Steinbrenner and shake his hand, because he came around afterwards and shook every player's hand and thanked you for the season and where it was. From then, I was afraid for overexposure. I didn't want him to know who I was. We just wanted to stick around and be grateful to be there. But those are the memories that come up. It was a thrill to be there, but it was anxiety ridden. Let me tell you that.
Quickly, Matt Crane. Tell me how you got the role of Matt Crane in For the Love of the Game.
Fluke, absolute fluke. So after the year that we talked about, 97, we lost in the playoffs. I had a chance to be one of the inaugural Tampa Bay Devil Rays. I had 2 offers after the 97 season. It was the Rays and the Yankees. And I had to weigh that. And I had to think about that for about a week. I had to call a lot of people. And I decided that 2 factors came into it. I had been through an expansion before. It was a great experience, but also a very bad one. And I didn't want to be remembered as Mr. Expansion. I had been up with the Yankees. I was on the major league roster. They'd taken me off in the offseason, but I was a known commodity. So I figured it was better to sign back with the Yankees than try to run the gamut of being an expansion guy again. Although my wife never lets me forget it, because we were living in Raleigh at the time, and Durham was the AAA site. And she said, well, if you're going to be in AAA, you could play at home. Like, well, I'm not signing to play in AAA. I'm signing to hoping to make the major league. Right. So anyway, that year goes on. And believe me, there's an end to this story, and I'll get there. That year goes on, and I had a decent year. And in August, I wasn't being called up. I was hitting 295, leading the league in stolen bases. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do in AAA. But there were no injuries like there were the year before. And make no bones about it, I was on the major league roster in the playoffs because Darryl Strawberry and people were hurt. They didn't have that the next year. And so that didn't open up an avenue for me. So they weren't going to call me up. So my agent calls me in August and said, I'm going to call the Yankees and see if I can get permission for you to leave, as long as it's to a major league roster. And we'll call the Yankees and we'll see if that could happen. He goes, okay. All right. So that sounds fine. Try it. Call me back. 2 days later, he calls me back. He says, Scott, I don't have a major league job for you, but I got another opportunity. I'm like, well, what's that? He goes, how'd you like to be in a movie? What are you talking about? He goes, well, Kevin Costner has this script. They want to film it in Yankee Stadium. George said only Yankees can wear Yankee Ross, be portraying the Yankees. They offered your name up, send a headshot. You can be in the movie. I said, all right, well, try. He goes, well, you're going to get paid just like you would as a major leaguer, but it will be after the season. I go, okay, send my headshot in. They assigned me the role of Matt Crane. No idea what that means, but they assigned me the role based on what I looked like. Okay. So they said, all right, we're going to fly to New York. Meanwhile, my teammates are playing in a World Series in San Diego. And they said, in order to use the stadium, we have to wait for that to close down. Well, they close it out in San Diego. We can start shooting the movie in Yankee Stadium. And that's how it came about. It was just a fluke thing. Tigers got wind that the Yankees were doing that. So when you see the Tigers play, there's a good chance Tigers minor leaguers are playing on that team. Now, Ricky Leday was in the movie. Mike Buddy, who was on the World Series team, was in the movie. He's now the athletic director at West Point. Dave Island, who's a longtime pitching coach, was the body double for Kevin Costner in some of those scenes. Mike Borzello is the body double for the catcher in some of the scenes. He became a major league coach and was on the Yankees as a staff member and when the Cubs were in the World Series. So there's a lot of baseball people intertwined. We'd sit around and wait.
Was this a one-night shoot for you?
Oh, no. Okay. This was over once the season ended up until Thanksgiving. So we were there for 6 weeks.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They we had access to the weight room in Yankee Stadium, in the craft table and the, where the actors ate and everything, the Screenwriters Guild and all the members, we were made honorary members. So my day consisted of what I would do: get up in the morning, work out all day, get ready for the season coming up, and then wait for to get dark so I could do my scenes. And then the game would end. Here's a surprise. The shoot would end 11 or midnight, just like a game. Go to the hotel, watch the last edition of Sports Center, get up and repeat. I just described the minor league season.
Yeah.
That's what we did. But I did it for an extended couple of months, but it was in a movie. Yeah. And then for as much baseball that was in it, we thought it would be like Bull Durham. All the action scenes and stuff ended up being a love story. And then just a little baseball sprinkled in. We had no control over what was in the movie. We just did the best from our baseball. And we could do another podcast about the stories that happened during the movie. But that's how it came about. And I was known as Matt Crane. The movie came out, and people will give me a hard time about For Love of the Game when it comes out now.
All right. Lastly, I want to ask about your family. First off, great story. And yes, we'll have you back on because there are, again, so many different things to get into deeper. But Lori, your wife, Peyton and Chase, your kids, I know they mean the world to you. Being a young father of a 2-year-old, I try to emulate some of the things that you're doing as far as relationship building, permanent relationship building with your kids, which I think is just awesome to see from my vantage point. And concerts and playing guitar are extremely important to you with your relationship with Chase, and travel and experiences are very important to you in your relationship with your daughter. So can you give me an idea what it's like to be a dad to those two awesome kids, and the special things that you are doing as a dad to kind of cement those relationships as they move into their late 20s and their adulthood?
I look back on my life and had a lot of time to reflect. My favorite times in my life were spending time with my family and friends. And I wanted to find ways to steal time with my kids. And kids that go through the natural progression where they don't want anything to do with their parents and they rebel. And I wanted to find a common ground that they can go through their natural stages, but that we could come back to. And with my son, baseball he liked it, but it was forced upon. I was his coach, but that was the way I stole time with him. Is I could spend time with him. He could be with his friends. I was watching proudly from afar. I'm teaching him the game. I had a ball with the kids that he was with, but there was a point where that ended. And we love still talk about baseball. We like to go to games and sports, but he was always a gifted musician and still is. He played piano at a young age. He could play guitar by ear. And I said, well, I'm going to try to meet him where he is. COVID had happened. I always wanted to learn to skill. Why not try to learn to play guitar? Now, I can play a fraction and enough to play rhythm with him, but it was a way to steal time, and it's become a passion. One of the things that we had always done was go to concerts. We have a list of concerts, and it's easier to tell you the people that we haven't seen. We've seen everybody, and I've corrupted him with the grunge music that I like and grew up in the 80s and 90s. But that's what we do. And so and time just slips away. We can spend 2 or 3 hours just playing. And I've learned more from him than I have any teacher. He teaches me. And so that's the way we spend time, and we accumulate gear, and I'm building a guitar collection for him. And it's just been a joy, and it's a nice escape. Peyton, on the other hand, she likes to work out, and that was our thing. We would run together and work out. So we do little things or yoga or travel. And so that's kind of what we do together, but it was, again, way to steal time with each, and we each have our own thing. Lori has that with them too. Lori does things with the kids, but we have a strong family, and it's something that I'm very proud of. And it's probably the best thing that I've done in my life. And I love it. And it's probably the best experience that I've had.
You've been a greater influence on me than you probably could ever imagine. So thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your partnership. Thanks for your time today. These stories are awesome. And get a nap. We got a game to do tonight.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Patrick. I appreciate it.
All right. That is Scott Pose joining us this week on the Durham Bulls podcast. Again, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. You can do that on Apple and Spotify for the audio version, and the video version. You can watch this on our YouTube channel at Durham Bulls TV. So for Scott Pose, for Jacoby McDuffie, who's our post-production savant, I'm Patrick Keenis, broadcaster for the Bulls. We'll see you next week on the Durham Bulls podcast.